Hello and welcome to another weekly update. I hope you had a good week. I had a great week. Beginning of the week was spent with Pexip. They laid on an excellent training a couple of days for MVPs at their headquarters in Oslo. It was excellent. Learned a lot all about the new kind of Teams integration that Pexip have. So yeah, it was great. And then been kind of busy the rest of the week as well. But a couple of things have been going on to tell you about. So first is a blog post I put out right at the beginning of the week, and it's called 5 Reasons You Should Be Building Apps on Microsoft Teams. And the reason for putting this out is that Microsoft made a poster available for developers around building apps on Teams, and I thought it'd be interesting to go through each of their bullet points and kind of talk about my experiences and whether I thought it was true or not true, or how important it was, how not important it was. And there's some really good points there that I didn't actually, I didn't necessarily consider. Things like effortless discovery. So it's that developer problem of, I've built the world's greatest app, but how do I get people to use it? How do I get people to even know that it's there? That it's, I have a thing that solves their problem. How do I even get them to know about it? Well, Teams does a really good job of surfacing apps. It's right there on the front menu. It's on that bar along the left-hand side. It's very easy for users to get to. On top of that, organizations can actually proactively push apps to users. You can have local app stores to organizations as well that don't want a kind of fully public access to all the apps for their users. So there's a number of different options. It's a very kind of rich place to run apps. And that's just kind of one of the 5 things. I'm not going to go through them all now, but that post is worth looking at. So that blog post, I'll link to it in the notes. You can get the poster for yourself as well. And I thought it was good. It's good to see kind of Microsoft and that Teams team looking at the kind of platform for developers and why it's a good place for developers to be, and kind of highlighting some of those things. Other blog post I've literally just pushed out actually because it's just been too busy, and that concerns the Calls and Meetings API. So the Calls and Meetings API is the new one that came out recently, announced at Ignite, that's in public preview, that lets you do calling, things on Teams such as kind of controlling calls and transferring calls and some IVR stuff and all those features. So it's new and exciting. I do have a sample that I'm working on that I'm hopeful to kind of release in the next couple of weeks. But anyway, so it's currently in public preview, and it's we already know that it's part of Graph. That was spoke about at Ignite, and if you look at the API calls, you can see it's a graph. It shows up in the Graph Explorer, but there's a couple of changes that it seems need to be made on its kind of journey from public preview to GA, and one of those concerns the name. So it's no longer called the Calls and Meetings API, it's now called the Microsoft Graph Communications API, which I think is a much better name. It's much better because calling it the Calls and Meetings API means that either you never add any features that aren't specific to calls and meetings, or it starts to kind of lose its effectiveness as a name. So, but calling it the Microsoft Graph Communications API is good because it then fits into Graph alongside everything else, and Teams is where you do your communication in Office 365. So it all makes a lot of sense. There's also some kind of breaking changes, or probably breaking changes depending on your code. So the NuGet packages, their names have all changed. You'll probably be alright if you keep using the old versions, but you'll get compiler warnings because they've all been marked as obsolete. Namespace names have changed, and that might kind of kill you. And some attributes and method names have changed as well, almost certainly will kill you. So bunch of changes. It's mostly just tidying up, basically. It feels like there's a standard that they need to kind of jump in line with to be on Graph. So it's just a kind of couple of changes to bring them into that. And then I had a couple of people ask me actually, where do you get this SDK from? Where do I download it from? And it's not like the previous versions. So let's say UCMA came with an MSI, which was a couple of DLLs, like a help file, some other bits and pieces as well, and you've got the MSI and you installed it on your app server and you were good to go. This is kind of different in that they're using NuGet, so makes it much easier for one thing, but if you're not familiar with NuGet, then you won't necessarily know what to do. In the blog post I go through what you should do in order to get this SDK onto your machine. It's actually easier than the MSI route, and it's like you should look into NuGet. If you don't, it's a great kind of package manager, and that whole idea of packages instead of like big monolithic MSIs holding bunches of DLLs with their dependencies is a kind of much better way to go. So there's one gotcha with getting this API from NuGet, and that is that it's currently marked as pre-release. So if you just kind of type it in and expect to find it, it won't show up in any of the searches, and it will prevent you from just downloading it unless you use a specific version to get the pre-release version. So what I mean is it's marked in NuGet as pre-release as well, because the whole thing's on public preview, I guess. So just be aware of that. I talk about it in the blog post and talk about how to get around it, but just be aware that that is a thing. And finally, I said last week that Microsoft were working on a migration from Google G Suite to Office 365 because I thought it was interesting, and that story got picked up by ZDNet. So Mary Jo Foley wrote an article about it and kind of linked to the stuff I said about it. So I thought that was interesting. I thought it was cool. I thought I'd let you guys know. You can go and look at that on ZDNet. I put a link in the show notes. And that's everything. That's all I've got for this week. We'll see what next week brings. But have a good weekend. And before I die coughing, I will talk to you again next week.